guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Joy Michelle and I make photography videos every single week. This week we are starting a whole new series, and this series comes from a question that I got from a girl, Eugenia. She asked me when and where to use off-camera flash and if I could make a tutorial series for beginners. And that is what I'm going to be doing for you guys today. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on the upcoming videos and that you can finish this series right along with me. I'm excited. As I said before, this is really geared towards someone who is just starting out with off-camera flash. Maybe you've used a flash on your camera and you're ready to take it to a next level, but you don't want to go crazy and have 5 off-camera flashes or get super complicated. So I'm going to keep this really basic. And I really believe you can do a ton with just a 2-flash system. So I first want to answer Eugenia's question about when and where we're using off-camera flash, because that is a really interesting question. When I'm using off-camera flash, I'm either at the reception or photographing people in a portrait setting where I don't have a lot of natural light. So I'm not using flash most of the time when it's bright outside. When it's light outside, it's just not my jam. I love natural light, so I'm gonna work with natural light when I can. But for weddings, when I no longer have the sun or I'm in an extremely dark church, I'm gonna use off-camera flash. And the reason for that is to maintain an ambiance and make sure I don't get that black background. So I don't know if you've ever taken a picture where you have an on-camera flash and your subjects are lit, but the background is just an abyss of black and you lose all the ambiance. So particularly for dancing, receptions, and all the important events that go on at a wedding at the reception, I wanna make sure that I can capture the room and what it felt like and people in the background. And I can do that really well with off-camera flash. So that's why I started using off-camera flash. And I think why many photographers go ahead and add flash to their system in the wedding world. First, let's just go over what gear I use and what you'll probably need to get started with off-camera flash. So first thing you need are some strobes. I use the Nikon SB910s, and you can really use anything. It really doesn't have to be Canon or Nikon. It can be any of the other brands as well. But what you'll need is 2 flashes. And I use one on my camera, of course, and one off camera. And then I also use triggers. So I use radio triggers so that I can kind of talk to my flashes when they're off camera. So what I'll do is I'll have one camera with me, I'll put a trigger on top of that camera, and then I'll put a flash on top of the trigger. So this is the setup that I have with me. And the reason I use triggers is so that I can change the control, like speeds and amounts across the room, so I don't have to go changing them wherever my flashes are off camera. Now I know actually that Canon has an amazing flash system and they have all of this stuff built in, but as far as I know, this isn't a built-in system with Nikon, and this is just how I started off-camera flash, so it's a system I'm very comfortable with. So I'm able to change my flash settings across the room. So for instance, I have one flash across the room and maybe a bride and groom are about to have their cake cutting. And I can go ahead and turn it down or turn it up and make adjustments without going and physically changing those settings on the flash. That's what I'm able to do here. So once I have this set up, I go ahead and I have one off-camera flash set up. I'll have another trigger and a receiver. So this guy's a little bigger because it's receiving transmission. Boom. And this guy will go off camera. So once I turn these guys on, if I trigger this camera, both of the flashes will go off. So you can kind of play around and you'll have so much more control over what kind of flash you'll get. So what I'll do typically is I'll put this on a stand, and I'll have the stand throughout the room wherever I see fit that it will light the situation best. The cool thing about this as well is that you can just slide it off the stand and it has the trigger built in, and I'll have an assistant or my second shooter hold this behind my couple, or I can set it on a table somewhere for outdoor shots. So I also like to get an end of night shot of my bride and groom if I can, weather permitting. So I think if you're just starting out with off-camera flash, you should start with just 2 flashes, one of them on your camera and one of them off your camera. That way you can play around with the different powers, you can play around with your settings, start to kind of figure out what you like to see in your images and how you're going to achieve that. And once you're more comfortable with that, you can add more flashes to the room and kind of grow from there. But I really feel that this is a good starting point when you're first starting with off-camera flash. So we've covered the gear that I use, my set, like how I set this up, how one of them goes off camera, one flashes on camera. For this particular system, I have to turn it on top to bottom. So I'll turn on my trigger, or I'll turn on my flash, turn on the transmitter, turn on my camera, turn on my flash, turn on my transmitter, and then I'll press the little side button and it says test, learn, and that button will sync them up. So then they're talking to each other. And then I can fire a few test shots. I look at my flash off the camera, I see that it's firing, and I'm good to go. If it's not firing, I check the batteries and I check that it's properly in the hot shoe. Those are the two things that are usually going wrong if you're playing around and it doesn't seem to be working. Obviously, this is just this system. You have to read the manual for whatever triggers you buy, or if you're just using the internal systems for your flashes. Once you understand the system that you have, then you can get creative and then you can play around with it. And sometimes it just takes the reading and the boring part, but it's totally worth it once you have it all synced up and it's doing exactly what you want it to do. So once they're synced, you can start to use them. Now, I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about the settings. It completely depends on the situation. So I'm always shooting in manual on my camera and manual for the flashes. I don't want my flash and my camera to decide my settings for me, because then they're going to vary a lot because it's using an internal metering system. So sometimes your flash is gonna be great, and then you're gonna turn and it's gonna think, oh, the situation is kind of darker over here, and then it overcompensates. So the best thing you can do is put your camera on manual, put your flash on manual, and learn from there. Your shots are gonna be more consistent and ultimately you're way more in control. So what I do is I'm in manual and I'm going to look through my camera and I'm gonna meter the situation, and I'm probably gonna meter a little bit dark because I know my flashes are gonna come in and fill. So that means I'm not gonna meter at 0. I'm gonna let it be a stop too dark or play around a little bit lower. But typically my ISO is around 800 to 1600. So I'm gonna throw some pictures in here. I have to go find some. I will record, I'll show you all the data and all the settings for the picture, so it should be kind of interesting to see what the shutter speed is, what the aperture is, that kind of thing. One thing to keep in mind about the shutter speed is that you are a little more limited in shutter speed when you use flash. So your sync speed is the highest shutter speed that you can use while still maintaining a sync with your flashes. You're going to have to stick around 1/200th of a second or slower. When you take a picture with flash, the flash freezes the motion, if that makes sense. So normally I wouldn't want to shoot at 1/25th of a second, but when I'm using flash, I can actually get away with it more, even at the reception, just for the way that it freezes motion. As a rule of thumb, I'm typically shooting at 1/16th power or 1/8th power. Sometimes I'm using my on-camera flash as the main flash and I'm just using a little bit of a key light or a fill. I play around with it, honestly. Sometimes I want the back flash that's kind of cutting my subject, giving them a little bit of like a ring around them and really making them feel 3D and coming off the picture. Sometimes I want that to be more powerful. So depending on where I am in the room, which we'll talk about next week, I'm gonna have different flash settings. So I hope that this was useful for you guys to see the flash setup, how I use one flash off camera, see a little bit of my settings. Next week, we are going to be talking about how to soften your light that comes from flash to just give it a softer look, where I stand in a room in relation to where I put my flashes, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the rest of this series. I would love to answer your questions. If you have any questions about flash or photography in general, leave them in the comment section below. I will be sure to get back to you. I am so excited about this series, guys, and I hope you are too. I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.